it looks kind of different.
Yeah.
So much different than the other one.
It is,
Are we all ready?
They did a beautiful.
I think we're all here. All the seats are filled. Okay, we'll call the meeting to order of the Library Advisory Commission for April 15th. May I have a roll call, please?
Commissioner Rubin,
Present?
Commissioner Bird, here. Commissioner Khandelwal, here. Commissioner Rogers,
Here.
Commissioner Termini,
Here.
Commissioner Wall,
Here.
and Commissioner Williams.
Here.
Great, I missed you all. It's been a while. Let's go to adoption of the agenda. Are there any additions or deletions?
I have an addition.
Yes.
I just wanted an update on the hiring process for the executive director. And so I don't know if that's part of the, I didn't see it as part of the library director report.
Let's put it under oral communications because I had a comment about that. Too.
Okay, great.
Great. So a motion to approve the agenda,
I move to approve the agenda.
second,
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, unanimous. And we'll move on to oral communications. And to your point, I had the pleasure of being on the panel.
Okay,
And they are still going to be interviewing next week, I believe it is. The final interview by the governing board
Yes, and staff.
and staff. And I can honestly say, we can't lose no matter what. What a tremendous group of candidates and, you know, in an environment where you'd think it would be difficult to get someone, number one, to take the job, number two, to come here. I was amazed every single time, and we whittled it down to, I think it's down to 3, and we can't lose. That's all I'll say.
Encouraging, yeah.
and were you on the panel as the library advisory commission chair? Okay, good.
And it was very robust, it was fast paced, there were some amazing candidates, Eric being one of them.
Mhm.
So we'll see how it goes, and I think you moved on to the next and final interview phase. Yes. May you be fortunate. We'll move on. If any other oral communications? Any oral communications from the public? Any from online? Seeing none, we'll move on to the library director's report. Eric.
Thank you. I have submitted it as a written form. And I'm happy to take any questions on it. But we've got some really amazing things coming down the pipe in the very near future. So
This is true.
I've listed some of the highlights of
Any
the program.
questions? Yes.
I don't have a question, but I'm just very pleased to see how much you have integrated programming into, now we've got libraries built,
Yeah.
you know, so it's kind of nice to see this. I just was wondering, the Aptos Friends have just started a programming committee because now that we don't have to build a library anymore, we have, you know, we've turned our sights and, so I talked to every friend group I could think of, you know, to see what they were doing, and my sister's friends group bought STEM kits. And so that was something we were thinking of, and I was a little surprised to read this. Delighted. But are you trying to coordinate with the French? I saw you got a grant for this, so kudos, that's fantastic. But are you trying to reach out to friends groups to, you know, coordinate?
I'm so glad you asked the question. So we are developing a schedule where the librarians at the branches will meet with many of them are already doing this, but it's going to be an actual scheduled process so that they can meet with the friends groups and provide enough time to plan it out and think it through and see if it aligns with our strategic plan, see if we have the capacity to support it, and to see if it works with our scheduling. And so what we try to do is plan our programs 3 months out. And so there's a quarterly meeting that the librarians have where they do that. And prior to those quarterly meetings, they're going to be meeting with the librarians, with the friends groups. And so we're going to start that in the fall. And in another month or so, I'll be laying out the whole quarterly schedule so that all the friends chapters can see it.
Thank you.
I have a question.
Yes.
I was curious, I saw just today that the libraries will be closed on the 25th
Yes.
for all branches for the staff. And I was just, curious, like why you picked Thursday, and I know before it was like half days, so why it's the entire day, and if you could just explain the
Sure.
reasoning on it.
So we do 2 a year, 2 major ones a year. Because we're a 7-day operation, Thursday is the best day, because, we have staff who are working, Tuesday through Saturday, a Sunday through Thursday, so this way we capture everybody. And every time we do these, we recognize we're packing too much into them. So a day is not enough time, but we don't want to do it any less with everything that we're trying to cover.
Right. Okay, I just know it has a huge impact on the public to be just closed on a random weekday with, you know, homework and people, things like that.
It does, and we try to be very careful about that. It's always, there's pros and cons to everything. The con to not doing it is then we risk not having the staff up to where we need them to be with their skills and having those conversations that we need to have as an organization with everybody together. So, and it's something that we'll be looking at in the, springtime next year when we do our next strategic plan, is looking at least this is my aspiration, is to look at the hours for the entire system. Because many library systems have a day early where they don't open to the public, so that just like our schools often have, half day during the week so that the teachers can meet and do their work as a team. We don't have something like that. So we're open, as soon as staff roll in, they have like 15 minutes to get the branches ready, and then we open to the public. And so one thing that we are thinking about looking at is having half a day where we open late. Or not half a day, but opening late. And so perhaps when we examine that, there's some sort of compromise. Maybe we're no longer meeting twice a year. If we're able to do that, maybe it's once a year. But right now we don't have that. So that's the only time that during the year that we have to get together.
And could you do it like 4 half days instead of 2 full days? Like, so it's just, you know, until 1 or 2. I'm just assuming that the amount of people that come through the libraries increase in the afternoon.
Yes, I understand. Now, that's a good point. It's something we'll look at. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah.
Any other questions on the report? None? And my apologies to new members. I think we have Nancy and Vivian, and welcome. And Nancy and I go back to when it was a whole different thing. See me later for details.
Is that something we could have some brief introductions?
Yes.
For
Yeah.
new members
Yeah.
and old members?
I didn't hear that.
Have a brief introduction.
A brief introduction? Well, I started with the library actually in 2003. And I came to a joint powers board meeting, and Ann Turner was the director at that time, and I asked about the Felton Library, of course, because and she said, it's totally gonna happen. We've got it all planned out. Michael knows about that. Anyway, and later on, so I was a citizen member of the Joint Powers Board starting in 2006 till 2014. So those were wild years. And I think it's much better the way it is now, where there's, you know, a 4% joint powers board. They work by consensus, which I think is really important because we were always counting votes with 9 people on the board and working hard behind the scenes to get what we wanted. So every member, it was a wild time. So I feel like it's a pretty good system now, much better, it's improved than it was then. And then I was on the library commission when it was first started for 4 years. And so I'm kind of coming back because our member sort of, the person that was representing the 5th district dropped off. Well, she was completed her time and she didn't really want to do it. So I thought I'd hang in there for our 5th district and thank you, check things out for a while, so.
Vivian?
So I've lived in Santa Cruz for a little over 20 years. I always gone to the library. My daughter was raised in them. And for a while I was executive director of the Friends of the Santa Cruz Public Libraries. And I'm very happy to be back.
Wonderful, welcome. Okay, we'll go on to, report by the Friends. I don't see Bruce here. Is anyone here from Santa Cruz Friends?
Bruce is no longer the
No,
executive director.
he's quite ill.
There's an interim, director, I'm on the Friends board, and there's an interim director, Monica Kuriba, who, is at the contract with us until the end of June, and currently advertising for, the position.
Wonderful.
Yes.
Anything to tell us about what Santa Cruz is up to? What the Big Friends is up to?
Big Friends, really hate that term. Not too wide, friends.
It's done with love.
Except for- It's complicated. Well, that's the big thing, and,
Sure.
we're having, in June, there'll be a turnover, a vote for the new officer, Janice Griswold, which you probably know, is currently the president. Launching a $1 million, $2 million, a lot of money, dollar campaign to support the downtown branch at this point, now that Aptos is over.
Excellent.
So
Thank you.
it's the campaign's actually, starting its quiet phase.
Good. We'll look forward to that, supporting it. We'll go on to member reports. Anyone have anything to report?
Just to say that the Aptos Library, if you haven't, since we didn't have the grand opening, if you haven't been there.
It was just a good opening.
It was a quiet opening, then, yeah, definitely go and
Yeah.
check it out.
I was gonna jump in on that too. The
Yes,
Aptos Library is spectacular and, full all the time,
Yes.
and they're doing cards and all kinds of technology and great programming. Mostly library staff. They have a mahjong class. Every Thursday, they're teaching Tai Chi. I mean, it is hopping.
Yeah.
It's fantastic and it's so beautiful. You can't walk in without smiling, so.
I'm gonna say I was there during the power outages, and talk about not stopping library patrons.
Yeah.
The place was full and everyone had a little lantern at the desk. There you go.
Well, Eric wrote up in his report about our, opening day, and thank you so much to the library for, even though they canceled the party, which they had to do, I totally appreciate that. But they allowed people who showed up, without any notice to come in. We had about 1,200 people in that day.
Oh, you did?
And we were excited and we lost power, but people didn't care.
Right.
It was so beautiful and, yeah,
Oh,
we haven't stopped, so, yeah.
Pretty amazing.
Yeah.
Move on to the consent calendar. These are usually items taken with a single vote, unless one of the commissioners would like to pull them. I would like to pull item C. So, if you would like to all vote on items A and B as a group, we can do that. Is there a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Second?
I'll second.
A, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? It's unanimous. Item C, I'd like to bring up because, I understand that we're moving away from the pandemic mentality. And that's where the hybrid meetings and the online meetings started. But I think that maintaining some kind of remote access to people is important. Whether it's an email during the meeting to be read as a question or someone online, I'm not sure how much technological lift it is to have the hybrid meetings, but we need some ability, whether it's a call in or email or online, to give people who wouldn't normally have access to our meetings or are incapable of making to our meetings are able to still participate. And accessibility is the word of the 21st century. So I think we should continue it. What do you think?
And I'm kind of curious, Yvonne, could you tell us approximately how many people access us remotely? In other words, how many people are on tonight?
There are no online attendees tonight.
There are none.
Yeah, kind of surprised, because usually there's at least one.
Yes.
Got it?
But tonight there's no one.
Do we know how many people watch the, recording? Is there a recording or there is, okay,
I don't know
Yeah.
the specifics.
okay.
So, and do we ever get, email, is there an avenue to do an email in the minute to a meeting. I guess if they weren't watching
so.
it,
Prior to the meetings, they can, and do. But we're not, for this, recommending a feature that would, permit that, because then we'd have to figure out how that would work, during the meeting, because it is still streaming. So we are still, streaming, it's just we lose the interactivity during the meeting around it. And-
so the action is to, what part of our system now will no longer exist?
That interactivity,
Okay.
so the Zoom, so it'll continue to stream. And I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, Yvonne, is that correct?
Yeah, so it'll still be streaming live to YouTube, but we will no longer be taking online questions live at the meeting.
And what kind of workload is that to maintain that? Not so much, for contagion, but just for accessibility.
To do the interactivity, it really does require two people. And so, it does create a little bit of a struggle when people have vacations or are out sick, or trying to get other things done. But we can support it with one person if we go to the streaming, version.
But that does not give the two-way communication that we would be looking for as if someone were in the room.
That's correct.
And perhaps you could come back at the next meeting, because I think the next meeting is pretty quick,
Yes, it is.
with a solution, even if it's a call-in, I don't know. Perhaps someone could be watching the streaming and call in, they do that in some of the cities now. Just to maintain that universal access.
Okay.
One thing I would be comfortable with as far as accessibility is if we knew that the agenda was posted like on a certain day, and I know we had talked about like the week was too impossible, but if it was like, maybe by the Wednesday or the Thursday, so people for a Monday meeting, something like that, then people would have the opportunity to email their thoughts.
That would help.
So then I would, because I
That's-
do respect for one or two people that really want that that streaming service, as opposed to recording, then, I don't know if it's, worth the staff expense or the staff
I'm
trouble.
not sure, maybe you could help, we could leave that off for now, and you could help us with that at the next meeting. And-
Sure.
Because there's this thing about a public meeting, someone speaking in person, whether it's remotely or at the meeting, has so much more impact than someone just sending in an email. They say one speaker from the public is worth 100 mails,
Mhm.
and it's true.
I was meaning an email that would be read by
Oh,
someone.
no, for sure.
Yeah.
And I think that's another thing that is definite. We've always had that.
Mhm.
I think that we've opened up our eyes to opportunities for accessibilities for shut-ins, for people who can't physically make it, for people who emotionally can't make it. The podium can be a scary place. We should consider that. Is there more consensus?
I would also say that because of where we're geographically located, that there are often events that occur that would prohibit somebody from getting to a meeting, particularly given where some of our locations are.
Sure.
That some of us are driving 45 minutes to an hour to get there.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I would.
Boulder
also
Creek,
say
to
that-
LaSalva. I mean,
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
It's a long grant.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I would say that it's sensitive to our environment, so that it makes sense here, even though logistically it may not make sense, or from a number of people accessing that, it may not be what you would normally fall to, but you could say that in a situation like we had, that sometimes that might be an alternative for the meeting.
Okay, so we'll table that one item and come back and we'll ponder it, and we'll agendize it as a discussion item. Okay, we're moving on to general business. Election of the chair and the vice chair for 2024. And I'll put it to the floor.
I would like to nominate Mike Termini to continue as our chair.
I second.
Are there any other nominations for chair? Okay, all in favor? Aye, opposed? Unanimous? And we'll move on to vice chair. Who's gonna
You're the
nominate
vice
Rena?
chair. Yeah, so I didn't ask you ahead of time, but would you be willing to? I'd like to nominate Rena Dubin to continue as our vice chair.
Second, she said.
Okay.
Any other nominations? All in favor? Opposed? We move right along.
Thank you.
Thank you
Thank
both.
you.
Thank you to both.
Code of conduct. Eric, do you want to give the report on this, or is?
Yeah, this is something that, we've been developing now for, multiple years, honing it as we go. As you know, our policies all have a period when they have to be revisited. So we're on schedule to do that. We're a little past schedule to do that for this code of conduct. And since we started doing these policies, I would say about a year ago, the library implemented 2 teams inside our organization. There were a lot of changes coming with COVID and having new directors. So we underwent a process to look at change management, and we brought in a consultant for that. And reviewed how the library manages change. And so there's an internal team that reviews it, and really what they're tasked with doing in a nutshell is to sort of ask the question, why? Why are we making this change? And then what's the best way to implement it? And so we also have an internal team that reviews our policies. Both teams have representatives from every level of the organization, because we know that anything that we do does impact everybody, and there's often unseen or unknown consequences to these actions. So we want to review it on every level. So what happens is we take it first through the policy to policy, we take it through the policy team, then it goes to the change management. This is why it's taken a little longer than it normally does. And then the change management asks those questions of the policy team, and then they both talk to one another and they make these revisions. There were some really dramatic changes to the code of conduct. And then change management looked at it, had these conversations, and asked that question, why? And so that forced everybody to kind of take a step back and review it. And at the same time that we've been doing this over the past year, we've been training our staff on de-escalation. And so we're attempting to really re-implement during COVID. Just before COVID hit, we had a customer service commitment. And then it didn't get fully rolled out because of COVID. So now we're bringing that back into the mix with our de-escalation training, and then the revised language in the code of conduct, which hasn't changed very dramatically since since the current one that we're operating under. But some of the language has changed because it's looking through this prism of de-escalation, and it's also trying to take some of the lessons that we've learned about what has worked, what hasn't worked. So this is the main tool that our staff use to really manage appropriate behavior inside the library and do it in a way that hopefully de-escalates the situation. And it doesn't always, because we still will have challenging patrons no matter what we do. And so we have to recognize that. The other underlying philosophy behind the code of conduct is it's the same policy that's practiced in Felton as it is downtown library. So we really, and staff this way too, and patrons will hopefully, ideally, get the same experience around these codes that they have at any of our branches. So, and there is leeway inside the code so that staff can still work with the patrons to, as I said, de-escalate things. But ultimately, that's what we've been working on. And so we presented it here, and that's one of the things that we'll be going over at the 25th, on the 25th at the in-service day too, is kind of reviewing where we are at the code.
I have that.
Yeah.
Thank you for this. This was interesting, to read. But I didn't really have context, like how much do you have to, is this something you have to use every single day in every single branch, or is it rare? And then if you could just maybe give us 2 examples of kind of common behavior that results in, a patron being suspended.
Yeah, it's when there is something that violates the code of conduct, where we had to ask a patron to leave, it gets entered into an incident report, and those incident reports are then provided at our JPA meetings. And I think that you can see from those that basically it is happening every single day, but it varies pretty significantly depending on the branch.
Okay.
And so I think that a common one is sleeping. There are, and this is pretty common in every library system. I remember a time early on when I was a librarian working in Queens and somebody was asleep and we had the same rule.
Mhm.
And they walked over and you just do a gentle tap on the table to try to see if they're okay. And it was somebody experiencing a diabetic coma. And so we were able to take that action, and that's not uncommon. There's often health issues behind this, not always. But it is something that if in the time before I understand, before I got here and before they had this, it did create a number of problems where you had people sleeping all the time. And you know, so that's not an uncommon one. And then depending on their state, some may be very cooperative and then others may not be. If they're waking up and if it is something that's been induced by a drug, or for other reasons, they may act sometimes violently. And then that's another step inside our code, right? So the first time we're really just trying to get you to wake up and make sure you're okay. And then, but if it's one of these other scenarios, then that triggers another area of our code of conduct. And then we ask them to leave. And so, and then, I've actually signed, so there's different, levels too. So there's certain things that the staff can do, depending on the severity. If the police have to be called, then it's automatic, a 60-day suspension from the library. If they're forcing us to have to call the police for something. If it's a threat to the staff, and this happened today, then it's a year-long suspension if they're threatening the staff. So we don't, so that just escalates things to a whole other level.
Thank you, that is helpful to me, thank you.
So the police would be called if there's a direct threat, that staff felt like they were being threatened physically.
That is, so in the instance that we had today, the patron threatened not just the staff, but the entire building, and then left. And I think sometimes too, you know, it's, no matter how well you're trained, you know, this takes a real toll on staff, and you can be in shock after this. So after I spoke with the staff, they hadn't yet, and I don't know if they would, because it was a very troubling situation. I had them call the sheriff's department. And I asked them to ask the sheriff to serve them the paperwork. So we have a suspension packet, and then after that, it becomes trespassing. So once we ask you to leave the library, and if you come back, then it is trespassing, and so then now it's a crime. And that's what it's laid out in the suspension packet. So partly your answer is yes, certainly we would call the police if there's a threat to the staff. A lot of times they threaten the staff and then leave. And so, but we have to call the police if they're not leaving after we've asked them to leave. Or another scenario that's frequent is after we've handed them the suspension, they return and they're trespassing. Then we don't really spend too much time sometimes we just say, you know, you are suspended. If the staff person knows the patron and knows that that's something that they can just tell them and say, you know, you're suspended, you have 3 more days until you can return. But if they're not cooperative, then we have to call the police.
Okay, I have one more question. So I'm just trying to run my head through this. So the patron gets a notice of suspension when they commit whatever act they commit, right? And do they at the same time get the request for suspension appeal hearing form? So that's what they would write out, you know, and take down to headquarters. I think
Yes.
that's what they're supposed to.
Yes.
So they get a copy of that also?
Yes, when they are handed the full packet.
Oh, okay.
So the packet isn't necessarily handed to them when they've been asked. It's not something, because it's something that we have to draw up. So let's go back to the scenario where we wake the person up and they have kind of a violent reaction. We're not going to say, hold on to that violent reaction, I have to go get some paperwork.
Yeah.
So we ask them to leave. We try to work with them to leave. If they're not leaving, then we call the police. And so it's usually after they've left that we draw up the paperwork. And oftentimes, if the police haven't been called, staff can suspend somebody. Any staff member has the power to suspend somebody up to 30 days. I would say the typical suspension is leave for the day. Take, go get some air, take a breath, come back tomorrow. But if it's any of these other things that are more severe, it's 3 days to 30 days that the staff have the ability to suspend someone, or if the police have been called, it's an automatic 60. If it's none of those scenarios where the police weren't called, but it's severe, then I have to sign off on it, and then I have the ability to suspend them
So-
beyond that.
My question is, how would that person know to submit a form if they want to appeal it? Because I think what I saw was that, you're supposed to go to the website and fill out the form or print out the form, and I saw that there's headquarters is, the address is listed at the bottom.
Right.
But I just wonder how many people know that's, if they wanna address what happened, how would they know?
So typically what happens is, when we're asking someone to leave, oftentimes they're in a state where they don't even hear when they're allowed to return, right? But they do end up returning. And at that point, all the branches are aware of the individual. And so any staff person at any branch has access electronically to print off the suspension packet that has that information in it. So when they return to the library, they say, I'm really sorry, you can't return today. All the information you need is in this packet. And if you have any questions, please contact that person. So today, in one of these cases where the person was very threatening to staff and everybody in the building, I didn't want staff to serve that paperwork to that individual. So I also asked them to inform the sheriff's department and send them the suspension papers. So the sheriff would serve them that information, and they would have all that information. But you're right, we can't often do it in that moment, but we
But
do
you
know
follow up and
when they
you do it,
return.
so they know they have 7 days.
Right.
To respond.
And I did ask James, James Lee, who is our branch manager for the downtown library, which has more probably incident reports than other branches in the system. We've been very fortunate because he's been on our change management and our policy team, and was the one who really helped author the original code of conduct. So did I leave anything out? Or I get anything wrong?
Just nothing left out, just for areas of answers, later. When someone is asked to leave the library, if they refuse to do so, then we call police for return. When somebody is suspended from the library, has not yet been served, upon their return, that's when we're serving them. But we're not calling the police when they come back, because they haven't yet been put on notice. And those suspension packages do have to be called and rights.
Approximately, how many people at this moment are suspended?
Oh, good question. I would not want to hazard a guess without looking that up, but I can certainly bring that back. Yeah, I would, more than 10 at this point that are
I would
suspended.
say probably 40.
Yeah.
For various durations, some people with violent offenses that are resulting in workplace violent restraining orders. Others that are just, they'll be back in 2 days. And really it's a valuable tool for staff that sets the expectations for routine behavior while we're in our group. And it's hard to tell people what to do or to enforce a rule on people. So the way we try to frame this is that everything in our code of conduct is meant to defend the rights of others to use our things. So we kind of put that in the right frame of mind to have these interactions, but we know that we're not there because we're the library police. We're there because we're making sure that others have the right to do.
And I think the other thing to keep in mind, it's a very good question, but thousands of people use our branches. And so when you think about that and you think of our annual numbers of people that we serve, the staff are doing a really amazing job at managing a lot of personalities that come in.
Yeah. Eric, what you described to me, I've seen it for years, being associated with this library system. It's very black and white. I think everybody here would agree that all the things that were explained to us, you're out of here. What about the gray areas where an otherwise normal patron starts to deviate or impinge upon the functionality of the library, and we have to step in and speak? That seems to be the most awkward and
Yes.
difficult
Yeah.
conversation.
There are, and one of the things that we're doing in our training on the 25th is having the library attorney come, because there are issues too about what people watch, and our First Amendment protections. And what do we do to protect, children who are walking through the space? So there are things that are still argued in courts, and we're watching that all the time. The California courts system and the federal court system both have, their own sets of rules, that come down the pike on these things. We have to watch both. And those things change. That's also why we have to do regular training, because we're always, having to update this. Same thing with ADA, same thing with, service animals that come in. Those rules change too. All these rules do change and we have to stay on top of it, but there is certainly gray area, and that's where the de-escalation comes into play. And so it's not like, depending on the gravity of the situation. So if you're threatening staff, then you have to leave immediately.
Clearly.
But for other instances, there are often multiple attempts to have conversations with them, saying, remind them, this is our code of conduct. And then staff are being trained too, so that if they have to have that conversation again, they actually walk. We want them to. They don't always have time to do this, but we'd like to have them walk the code of conduct over. So, because often the first question you get is, show me, right? Show me where's that in the rule. So that's one of the reasons why we have this long thing, because that's the most common response. No matter if any objective person or reasonable person saw the activity going on, they would know right away that's a wrong behavior. But 9 times out of 10, no matter what the behavior is, somebody will still say, show me where it is. And so then we have this code of conduct. But even then, we give people chances. Often it's often kind of 3 times you're out kind of rule. So if we've had that conversation, especially if that conversation has gone poorly the first 2 times, then it's less likely that by the 3rd time, we're gonna make another exception.
Any other questions on this? Anyone from the public? Oh, yes, please.
Eric, when you say staff, does this fall primarily to the manager or the librarian or the LA2 is involved at all? How is that come down?
The one person it doesn't fall on is the aides.
Right.
But everybody else is responsible for pursuing the code of conduct. But we want them to do it if they think it's a potentially challenging situation. Our preference is always to have them do it in pairs. And then if they really run into a roadblock, then that's especially when it's important to bring the manager or a supervisor that scenario.
Any other questions?
I have a question. I'm
Yes.
just curious how the staff communicates who's suspended, because I'm sure you don't have a photo wall or something.
Well, we have something close to that.
Oh, you do?
But it's digital. And we have a software package that everybody has access to, and everybody gets an email automatically of the incident. And then sometimes if staff were able to, then they captured a picture of the individual. Everyone's familiar with the 20/80 rule, right? So 20% of the issues are created, or 80% of the issues are created by 20% of the folks. So oftentimes they're repeat offenders. And so by the time it becomes a repeat offender, we have photographs of.
Oh, you do, okay.
Yeah, and that comes up in their email box for all staff, along with the pitch report. So this is what we call it. And what does it stand for again? Personal, no. What is it? Thank you. And so you'll see that report and then the history of violations too. And so that's, like I was saying before, it's another area where things become less gray. If this is someone that we've documented, where we've tried to have a conversation with, or if there's been a serious incident, then it's more likely to be an escalated penalty of a suspension, which is the only penalty we can offer.
Understood? Yes.
I was talking one day, everything the library does is about giving information. So all of our initial contacts with someone when they're violating our code of conduct is just that information. Excuse me, sir, you may not have been aware. Pardon me, miss, we ask that you not put your feet up. So it's always started with just that informational approach, just like everything else. It depends on how they respond or how cooperative that person is with us. It will determine if it has. Unless it's, of course, like egregious, if you're attacking someone in the nonfiction section, we're probably not gonna have that conversation, but it always starts with that just informational approach, and we're hopeful that it's gonna go the right way. But there's just, there's no reason that hopefully adjust your behavior so that. And as far as numbers, I know that when we adopted the new incident tracking system, we had over 300 contacts. individuals that violated our code, many of them had multiple contacts. Now that we've changed over the nervous system, more than 400, the number of people who contacted and able.
And I do want to reiterate a really important point that James made, and I'm really glad he made it. I'm really glad that you were able to come today. But which is, all these rules are really established to protect all of the patrons who come in and the staff who come into the library, to make sure that they are having a welcoming environment. So I really think that's an important point. We're not doing this, as he said, arbitrarily or for a reason. And though it may seem that way to the patron who we're talking to. Because as I think most people know, you have your perspective on something, and that's why we have a system in place so that if they do want to appeal it, then they can bring those facts forward. But it's also a benefit when we ask that there be two staff typically who do the interaction, so that there's other people who are witnessing this as well.
Well, I'll bring it back to the commission here, and we've been asked to endorse it. Is there a motion to endorse?
I would move to endorse the
Sure.
code of conduct policy.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
There's been a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous. Thank you. Okay, the next item under general business is the bookmobile presentation. My favorite. I'll give you a quick story. 15 years ago, or whenever we bought the new bookmobile, I lobbied so hard to drive it back to the Midwest. When I heard it was being transferred by someone, I went, I want to drive a bookmobile. Alas, I couldn't get it.
It didn't look like this, Mike.
No, it didn't look like this, no.
Well, good evening. My name is Jessie Silva. I'm a librarian at the Downtown Library and also with Outreach. And I'm here to give an overview on the bookmobile. I'm going to start with the bookmobile's mission, which is to provide library services in communities that are underserved by traditional branches due to physical, economic, social, geographic, or other barriers. Here you can see the bookmobile is parked near the low-income housing near the New Lagoon Park. Are you familiar with that area?
Space bar?
So the first traveling library in Santa Cruz began in 1950. You can see this newspaper clipping from our clipping files there, pictures, article about it. And this is 1950. And this local woman wanted to bring books to people who couldn't leave their homes for various reasons. And she partnered with the Santa Cruz librarian to bring library books out to people. And then in 1971, the library bought its first bookmobile. You can see it here in front of the stop sign. And at that time, it served all over the county and rural areas. And I pictured here two pictures of Catherine Steele. You can see she's loading books out of a decommissioned police car. And then above, she's welcoming some patrons onto the bookmobile. And I include her in our history because she really laid the foundation for the services today. And she had a passion for bringing library services to underserved communities in Santa Cruz County. And she's kind of inspires all of us on the team that we do. Today, bookmobile serves low-income housing communities, senior living facilities, and rural communities such as Buena Vista Labor Camp in South County and the town of Davenport. And one of the low-income areas would be the Beach Flats Park. We just park right in front of the park there and serve the whole neighborhood. There are currently 23 bookmobile sites, and each site receives services about every other week, so about twice a month. And the bookmobile is ADA compliant. It has a chairlift for those who may need it. We also provide deposit collections to 7 child care centers throughout the county. These mini collections of books are delivered monthly and curated for each site. One site that was recently added is the Cabrillo College Children's Center, which provides Cabrillo College student parents with free or low-cost childcare services. And then you can see the list here of all the other centers that we serve. We also offer lobby stop services for sites where the bookmobile cannot serve, either because the site is not suitable for parking the truck or because patrons are better served by us bringing services inside the building, such as some senior living facilities. Right now, we do this at Janus Recovery of Santa Cruz and Sunshine Villa, which is a senior center. We'd like to expand to other sites. We recognize that the bookmobile cannot park everywhere, and there's a lot of places that would like those services. So we're trying to find ways to, you can see when we set it up, we basically bring the library inside the facility. So other places we'd like to do are sort of other substance use recovery sites, some senior living facilities, and homeless services centers such as Housing Matters or even the Armory site in Santa Cruz. The Bookmobile staff also supports homebound patrons and the Book Buddies program. Homebound cards are available for individuals who are unable to visit a library due to disability or extended illness. The Bookmobile staff are responsible for setting up these accounts for homebound patrons. The Book Buddies are volunteers who pick up the books from the library and deliver them to the homebound patron. And the Book Buddies, that program is overseen by our volunteer coordinator, who I believe we've recently hired for. It's very exciting. Currently, the Bookmobile is staffed by 2 Bookmobile LA2s who operate the truck and deliver the services. Eric Chalfant, who's pictured here in a Sentinel article from about a year ago, he's been working on the Bookmobile for 26 years.
Oh, boy.
Yes, and he is our expert Bookmobile staff person. Eric is joined by Tyree Ritchie, who began about a year ago with the libraries on the Bookmobile. And I took on the supervisory role of this team and service at the beginning of this year. And I come with extensive outreach experience, especially serving our county jails and juvenile hall. So some plans for the future. We hope to expand sites and lobby stops. And some areas that we notice, especially the rural areas of San Lorenzo Valley, we'd like to look into. It's complicated because it's hard to get the book truck into some of those sites. So that's where the lobby stop sites might come in handy. And we'd like to integrate the jail reach service team with the Bookmobile service team because our methods and our mission are very similar. We do a lot of the same type of work. We've got a lot of the same philosophies, and we could then support each other and expand services that way. And we have a new book bike. You can see, this isn't it here, but this is the model that we've got. And it's funded by the City of Santa Cruz's Carbon Fund Award. It's gonna have an electric assist. And it'll be full of books, so it'll be easy to take it up hills with that electric assist. And we will be taking it to kind of smaller sites in the city of Santa Cruz. And the other thing that I'm hoping to do in the next year is to begin working with librarians to bring programs to our sites, such as like story time for rural and low-income families and tech tutoring for seniors. And that's it. Thank you for your time and attention. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
So you talked about going into some of the farm labor camps. So they seem to be in Watsonville. Are you partnering with Watsonville Library or how, I mean, are you?
So we can serve in the outskirts of Watsonville, just not in the city limits of Watsonville. I actually have a map in my office that shows exactly where like Santa Cruz County is, and then Watsonville is kind of separated out. And I believe Watsonville Public Library recently did get not a bookmobile, but like a Sprinter van, and they're doing a little bit of outreach with that. So the Buena Vista Labor Camp is outside of the city limits of Watsonville. And we do have quite a few sites in South County that are outside of the city of Watsonville, but in that area.
Very cool. I mean, that's really an exciting program. So you say you go to these sites like every other week. So do they know like Tuesday morning at 10, you're gonna be somewhere, and then Wednesday afternoon at 3, you're gonna be somewhere?
Yeah, so on our website, you can see the updated calendar.
Okay.
It'll show you like when the next stop and site is. And then Eric, he makes little half sheets and it has the name of the site and the next 3 to 4 dates.
Okay.
And with every checkout, he hands those out as a
Oh,
bookmark. And
nice.
it's really, and it's really helpful because sometimes we have to skip a site or something comes up, maybe we're going to a staff day.
Uh-huh.
So those are like really up-to-date, accurate times of when the book will return.
That's incredible. You do that in your spare time. Yeah. I figured that out later. While you're watching television.
So how can, people make a request to get the bookmobile to a certain location that doesn't get service currently?
On our website, there's a phone number and an email address, and we do get people that reach out, and Eric Chalfant will go out and scope out the site. But we have a criteria. It does need to fit into that low-income housing, senior living facilities, those barriers, economic, social, geographical barriers. So we've had some places that just want the bookmobile to show up for like a party or something fun. And this service is really funded and reserved for doing outreach to marginalized communities or communities that don't necessarily normally get library services, don't know that the library is for them. So that's kind of.
We have a school district that's closing its libraries, so we definitely would be able to
Yes.
use a bookmobile versus a 45-minute drive to it.
Yeah, so those, the other thing that we have to consider is capacity. Like I said, we have 2 LA2s, bookmobile LA2s. One is full-time, one is 3/4, I believe. And although I'm the supervisor, I'm not on the bookmobile. I do go to the Janus lobby stop with my connection with the county jails. It's kind of a natural fit. I see a lot of the same patrons. And I'd like to be on the bookmobile more, but I'm, kind of ramping that up a little bit. One of the things I'm spending my time on right now is working to get librarians to come and do some programs.
But, to Jessica's point, there are other avenues for the library to support the schools, which we do. So, I encourage you to reach out to Heather Northwest, who's in charge of youth services, because she helps to strategize around which schools, we're able to send librarians to. And so we have other ways of getting books to the schools as well.
Eric, since librarians are being peeled back from so many public schools, I've often thought that it was not only a service, but a revenue stream to contract with school districts to provide library services.
Well, they don't have the money.
Yeah, right.
That's why they got rid of the
That's
librarians.
why
to
they
begin
got
with.
rid of the
No, I understand that, but maybe
Yeah.
it's more
You
economical.
can't stand them up with volunteers because they're union
Right.
positions, so.
And maybe it's more economical for us to do it than them having a full-time librarian. I don't know.
Yeah, and, no, I mean, it's definitely an interesting thought, and I know some library systems who have done something very similar. One thing that, we are always moving further and further doing, and we've done it in the Santa Cruz, city, system, is to provide, digital cards, for the students. And so, they're able to access some of our digital materials now. And it's something that the state is pushing to do for all school age children, is to link their student ID with a digital card to provide access. So that's one avenue. But other systems have provided more robust system, like they've actually provided a whole carrier service of books directly to the schools. So it's worth looking into.
Sorry, Rena, you had something?
Yeah, I just wanted to echo, like, I'm really excited about the programming idea, because I think, people just think of books, and it is a bookmobile, but if people are understanding that they can get services or programs attached to that. That's really exciting to me. And the other thing is, I'm just curious, how many of the books that are lent out on the bookmobile, how many of those do get returned in 2 weeks or whenever? Like, or is it kind of like they get loaned out and then we might not see them? I don't really, it's not that I think the service should be discontinued. I'm just curious.
I don't think it happens enough that it's actually an issue, that I'm aware of. Eric Chalfant was, when we met and talked about some of the big issues. I think the rate of return is pretty high. And I imagine maybe even higher than branches, because sometimes we're going often to their homes. So, but yeah, I don't know that number off the top of my head, but I don't think that it's an issue.
Okay, great. That's fantastic.
Great.
Nancy?
I always find it surprising how many people I know about bookmobiles from their own childhood experience. And I think it's just a fabulous program. And I'm really happy we have it. Thanks for running it and your staff.
Thank you.
James had a comment.
Sorry.
No, go ahead.
Just from my perspective with, Bookmobile Legion, they usually get a longer checkout, they get a 4-week checkout period. So it lines up more than line with the Bookmobile visit times. And if I don't want return from them, they would be billed just like a regular fee. So after 28 days past the due date, they would still be charged for it. And I don't see high occurrences of bill balance on Bookmobile Legion.
But that's good to know they get a longer
Yes,
checkout.
that makes sense, that it would align with the dates that are within that. Thank you, James.
Are there any statistics kept as far as, I don't know how you compare per capita bookmobile versus a small branch or something like that, but is there any statistics about how popular the bookmobile is as compared to a comparably sized library?
I actually looked at the circulation stats for the last fiscal year. So number of books that were checked out, and it was about on average, 3,000 a month, which is close to, I believe, Boulder Creek. And just under LaSalle Beach and Garfield Park. I think LaSalle Beach and Garfield Park are around 4,000. This is last fiscal year, so I'm trying to think, I don't think anything was closed, but, so
And for this number of books on the bookmobile compared to Boulder Creek is what, small fraction?
we just counted actually.
Well, the full capacity is 2,500 items, but that doesn't mean that we always carry, that's just how much you can handle. So I forget now,
It's just under that.
yeah, that we're keeping, so.
Whereas Boulder Creek would be roughly, who knows?
I'm able to find out for you in a minute.
I just, order of magnitude, wondering.
Yeah, another challenge with that too is when we go to a senior living facility, we try to curate the collection on the bookmobile. So we've got a lot of audiobooks and large print. But then when we're going to like Buena Vista Flavor Camp, we need more like children's books and books in Spanish. Cooking books are really popular out there. So that's another thing, is we can't just leave like the same 20,000 books on there.
Yeah.
Can people request books and then you bring them? So that's great.
Yeah, they can request them system-wide and they get sent to the bookmobile operations, which is at the headquarters downtown Santa Cruz. And they send up whatever location that the person signed up at.
That's great.
And then if they want to pick it up at the branch, they can also do that. We just have to note that when it goes to.
Very good.
Very cool.
Thank you very much. Amazing. I think we have a presentation on collection now, do we not, Eric?
Yes, we have, a lot of things changing in the world of collections, so I'm really happy to have Sarah Harbison, who is our manager in charge of collections, present on the evolving world of
Thanks, and I'm kind of sorry to have to go after Jessie, because she had these really beautiful slides, and I have a lot of charts and graphs and numbers. But I'll do my best.
We won't hold it against you.
Okay, let's see. presentation for the letter. Oh, there it is. Okay, great. So today this evening, I just wanted to talk through some of the challenges and pressures in managing and budgeting for a library collection. So one of the things that we track in managing the budget and the collection, of course, is the circulation. So we've been tracking the physical versus digital circulation for the past few years pretty carefully. And so you can, I'm not sure if you can read it very carefully, but the blue bars represent the physical circulation. So those are the books, of course, the audiobooks on CDs, playaways, magazines, actual physical things that would be checked out from a branch. And that orange line is the e-materials. So the e-books, the e-audiobooks, the streaming video and music that can be checked out through our vendors. So you'll notice some pretty different things there. Of course, fiscal year 20 quarter 4 represents the pandemic closures. So of course, our physical dropped to almost nothing. And we can see that spike in the e-materials because that's what our patrons had available to them. Fiscal year 21 quarter 2, it's really hard to see it on there, but there's a little bump in there, and that's because we initiated curbside service. Fiscal year 22 quarter 1, there's another little bump, kind of a big bump, and that's when we allowed branch browsing again. So we allowed patrons in our branches, and the Capitola branch opened, which was a really big deal for us. And patrons can come inside and see that beautiful branch. And then the second to last bar there represents, that's the first quarter we have all 10 branches open. So Aptos Library opened and all the other branches are open. Even though compared to the physical bars, the e-material looks like there's kind of a little spike and then it comes down a little bit, but it has increasingly kind of gone up slowly there, and it represents an 88% increase in circulation over the past 4 years. So that's just another challenge for us to budget for the e-materials and the physical materials. And so this chart represents the way that we've been budgeting. This is, or the way that we've spent our money over the past few fiscal years. So that kind of gold color is the physical and the blue is the digital. And there are a couple little increases there in the gold. Otherwise, we'd see kind of a trend of the blue getting bigger and the gold getting smaller, but we've had a couple of blips because we've opened these branches and we wanted to have really robust, vibrant collections in those branches. So kind of up to our physical spending during this fiscal year.
And what about the spike in 22-23 for digital? Can you?
That, we just had a lull in the spending for the branch, or branch opening, the way that we did our spending.
Okay.
So I think that represents more the trend that we'll see over the next few years.
Got it.
Just because we've seen such an increase in those digital materials.
Can I ask, is this kind of comparable to what other libraries are seeing?
That's such a good question, and Eric and I talked about this, and I'm still working on getting that information from other libraries, kind of our peer libraries. And I want to make sure that I'm like comparing apples to apples on that. Because I want it to be a meaningful comparison. But I can't say overall for public libraries, the trend is definitely more digital and less physical, just based on the demand.
Is there a division between adult and juvenile books and electronic and physical?
Oh, that's a really good question, Nancy. And we do have those statistics available. I didn't include it in this.
It's just
We can
something I'm
provide that.
interested in because, I personally feel, and I think a lot of people do that, they don't want their kids looking at screens more than they have to, because now schools, you're looking at screens too during school time, and so, I'm just hopeful that we, spend a lot of money on physical books for kids as opposed to ebooks or,
Well, we do both, but
yes, I know.
we budget a lot for the J collections. The picture books for kids is our highest circulating collection in the system. Because of course, if you've been to our libraries, you see the stacks of picture books being checked out. And then the J graphic novels, the kids graphic novels are also right up there as well. We have a partnership with some of the school districts with Overdrive, and those students can use their student accounts. It's usually they've got a Google account that they use for school, and they can use that to log into our Overdrive collection. So not the whole thing, the school can choose which audiences they want. So it would just be probably just the kids material, maybe some teen material. So that is something too that we're seeing on checkouts for the kids materials.
But that's on that's the Overdrive is just electronic.
Yes. Yeah, just the materials. Okay, so another very difficult challenge for us is budgeting for the streaming materials. So that includes Hoopla and Canopy. And so there's been a pretty consistent trend in our spending per month just going up. And so as we started to reach the end of this fiscal year, we realized we don't know if we can pay the bills. It's really taken off in popularity. We budgeted what we thought would be an appropriate amount. So we made a few changes, and you can see for both Hoopla and Canopy, those changes went into effect beginning of March approximately, that our spending has gone down. And so we're looking at our budget for next year and what we can afford to bring back. I'll talk about it a little bit more, but we had to lower a price point, just the way that those licensing agreements work with those vendors. We just made some changes. So they still have really robust collections. We just have to pull back a little bit for the rest of this fiscal year and talk with our community and decide what we want to do for next
So
year.
Sarah, does that mean there are longer waiting times for a book? Or is there just a whole swath that is just no longer available?
Just not available.
Okay.
So for both Hoopla and Canopy, everything is instantly available. There's no waiting list.
Okay.
For those models. So we did limit patrons on the amount of content that they could access per month. But it's just been so popular and so many people have realized what an amazing thing it is. And so the more patrons we have using it, and then the more content that they're consuming on there, it's really hard to do.
I want to mention maybe what Canopy offers, like the measured collection, the material. Since it's documentary on it, and compare it with Hoopla. So I don't know if everyone's familiar with what Hoopla and Canopy offer.
Yeah, so Canopy is streaming video. And so they offer a lot of foreign films and independent films, not mainstream movies necessarily that are coming out, but definitely some critically acclaimed films. They have a few episodes on there of British TV. There's Canopy Kids, and they have really high quality content for kids on Canopy. And so what we did is we added different plus packs. So there's, and now I'm gonna blank on what they are. One of them is called Diverse Films. There's Favorites, there's Easy Watching. There's a Episodic TV, which is the one that has a lot of the British TV episodes. They just released a documentary package, and so there are some documentaries in there, but we're soon gonna get
lot more documentaries in Canopy. Hoopla also has streaming video, but their content is not as robust. But the number one format that our patrons use Hoopla for is audiobooks. So they are downloading and streaming audiobooks. But they also offer ebooks, and they also have streaming music, which we were really excited about when it first came out. We thought, oh, this is great. Patrons can check out music albums online, but it hasn't really taken off. Yet. I think it's just the way that the industry is going. But yeah, there's never a wait, which is really appealing. Overdrive has the new popular titles, but I'll talk about lending models in just a moment in our licensing, but for those, there is always a wait. So those new bestsellers.
And the movies too are a great way to build community as well. I just to put a plug in for the friends here at Scotts Valley, they have a really cool program called Popcorn, Pages of Popcorn. So they're talking about books that have been made into movies. And so they're just kick that off. So, but there's so much to get from, especially from these documentaries, and we often do. Capitola has been doing a lot of documentaries at movies with that space as well.
And one amazing thing about Canopy is they offer public performance rights for almost all of their titles. I think there might be a couple exceptions in there, but so it's wonderful for the librarians to be able to pick a title and be able to screen it in the library and not have to worry about the rights. This slide shows unique users per month. So we can look at circulation, but really this is the number of individual patrons that are using these services each month. So you can see, of course, Overdrive and Libby is our most heavily used service.
You go back.
I just had a question about that, because I'm not quite up on all this, but, so is that because when you're searching for something in the library, you come to the book and it says Overdrive, or, I mean, you don't see Hoopla or Canopy. So I think that people probably don't know about Hoopla or Canopy as much as they do Overdrive, probably. Does that make sense?
It does make sense.
Because of the way the catalog kind of displays its information.
I think it's right, a combination of that discoverability of knowing that it's there and knowing that the title they want is available from Hoopla. And then also the content, because Overdrive has those bestsellers and a lot of the popular authors that people are looking for.
Yeah.
We have had conversations about loading the records, so the individual title records from Hoopla and Canopy into our catalog. But Hoopla has tens of thousands of titles. It's amazing how much they have. And so then the question becomes, would it kind of drown out everything else if we loaded all of those titles into our catalog? Or if we just load some of them, how do we make the decision about which ones to load in? So it is an ongoing conversation about how we make things discoverable. Okay, so I just wanted to go over these lending models, because this oftentimes also becomes kind of a pressure on our budget as far as when selectors are purchasing the e-materials, the e-books and the e-audiobooks. These are defined by the publisher, and we don't always get to choose the lending model that we think would work best for us. So this is an example of an e-audiobook, and it's available in one copy, one user, or metered access. So one copy, one user is just like checking out a book from the shelves here. Only one person can use it at a time, and then there's a wait list for that copy. So of course we can purchase multiple copies of it as our budget allows, and if there's demand for it. But there's still a waiting list and only one person per copy at a time. There's another lending model called metered access. And sometimes these are by time or by, number of checkouts. And sometimes they also have an end date, as well. So for example, this one says, 100 checkouts and they are concurrent users. So we do use this lending model when there is a really hot title and we're seeing really lengthy waiting lists. And so we can get one of these, and if there's more than 100 people waiting, then those 100 people can all get it right away. Which is great. So, but it's not always available for all of the titles that we might hope it would be available. But then, of course, once 100 people have used it, then we have to repurchase it at what is usually a pretty high price. Selectors tend to like those, depending, of course, on the title and the audience, but the ebooks and the audiobooks that are one copy, one user, with no expiration date on them. So it's just in perpetuity and they don't have to replace it after a certain amount of time. Sometimes they expire after 12 or 24 months. And there's also a simultaneous use plan. And so an example of how we use this plan is with the Overdrive magazines. So if you've ever used the Overdrive magazines, they don't count against your 8 checkouts. You can have as many magazines checked out or as many issues as you want at one time. And there's an unlimited number of users. So everyone who has a library card can check out the new issue of the New Yorker and it would be fine. It wouldn't cost us any more money. So that's simultaneous. And then we also have, so this is how we've got Canopy and Hoopla, and these are the terms that they've set for us. There's pay per use. So when a patron checks out a film, for example, we get an invoice for that checkout. And then there's also a cost per serve. And so for some, I don't think we have any of the 950, but I was trying to get an idea of the price range, and there is an audiobook that is $9.50 per borrow, which I just thought was a little interesting because which library would purchase that lending model? But it is out there. So yeah, and so then we don't get an individual invoice for each checkout, but each month we get an invoice listing all of the titles that were checked out and their individual price. So that's how has been working with both Hoopla and Canopy. But the benefit to having Hoopla with this cost per serve is that we can offer a really wide variety of titles. So in Hoopla, there are thousands of titles that none of our patrons ever check out. And then there are also a bunch that maybe one person checks out. But it allows us to have that one title that we probably would not purchase for just one patron to check out once, but they still get access to it. So it's been really.
If you were searching for that title and it didn't come up in our, catalog, would they know that it was in Hoopla?
They might not, because
Yeah,
we
okay.
have those Hoopla records. And
Yeah, okay.
We do, there is a restriction that you can only rent up to 4 times a month in Hoopla.
Oh.
Because I've used Hoopla, and so you have four free rentals, and then after that, you can't get it.
Okay.
May I ask about the books that are always available? I mean, I'm always surprised on audiobooks, how there's that list of available now, and it's a long list and they're popular books. What is that model? I mean, is that a pay per use, or is that 100 checkouts, or?
Well, it's invisible to you as a borrower to know what the lending model actually is. You can just see that it's available. So some of them might be that metered access, like 100 concurrent users. But a lot of the titles in Overdrive, if it was something, I don't know, that last year or the year before was a really popular title, we ended up buying multiple copies of, and then the list is just kind of slowed down, and so then we'll have available copies. We also have a few Lucky Day copies in both ebook and e-audio overdrive, so then those will be available
Mhm.
and skip the wait list.
Yeah, I've gotten that a couple times. It's pretty nice. Yeah.
Okay, and I just wanted to show, this is a title, I don't know if you're familiar with this title, but it currently has the longest hold list right now for both print and digital. So I wanted to use this as an example, just kind of the pressures and how selectors are managing that demand with a really limited budget. So the print, I don't know, I didn't update this today, so hopefully we purchased a few more copies. So for print, 8 were purchased. So that means that they belong to Santa Cruz Public Libraries. We keep them as long as we want to keep them. 33 are leased because we know this title will definitely want 8 to keep in our collection long-term. And 33 are leased just to help that holds list to support getting the title to our patrons quicker. And then we've got 22 Lucky Day copies. And I've been watching and those tend to get snapped up really quickly. Large print, we don't have any yet. It's showing publisher out of stock already. So we're working on getting the large print format of that book. We'll likely get the Spanish as soon as it's published, but it has a date out a few months still. We purchased 4 of the audio CDs with 9 folds, which is interesting because that was surprising to me that there were that few folds. So we're really seeing that switch from people checking out the audio CDs to the downloadable or streaming audio. The Playaway format, you know, this little device that you can plug the headphones into. It's not available on Playaway yet, but selectors, when it comes out on Playaway, will likely purchase it. And then we purchased 32 ebook copies in Overdrive. And so that metered access 24 months is, so it's a 1 copy, 1 user, and then it expires after 24 months and we'll have to repurchase it again. So we know for sure there will still be demand for this title in 24 months because those Kristen Hanna titles have enduring lists and interest. And then we've got 2 Lucky Day ebook. And then we've got 222 holds on the ebook copy. And that's just our Santa Cruz patrons. If we look, because we're also part of the Northern California Digital Library Consortium, and it's like 600 holds or something. So if you ever see that when you're going to place a hold and you see your number 638, don't worry, you're probably just gonna hop, skip, and jump because the Santa Cruz holds list is a little shorter. And then, yeah, we're working on getting more of we just kind of moved some money around in our budget to get more of the e-audio books because we've got 225 books.
Do we have a big adult Playaway collection?
Fairly sizable. Those
Yeah,
seem to be.
I don't even know where they are. I have to look. I didn't know I thought they were mainly for, you know, young children or younger children. But, okay.
Yeah. We don't buy everything on Playaway and not everything is available on Playaway. But they are enduring despite many predictions that the Playaway format is really go away. Yeah, still get requests for those.
Has anybody here read the book?
Yes.
Was it?
Yes, one of
In
those.
3 days, yeah.
Yeah.
450 pages.
This is my
I
first
told my
5-star of the year.
I told my sisters, I stayed up till like 1 o'clock in the morning reading it. Yeah, it's excellent.
Good.
The ones you don't want to end.
Yeah,
It's crazy.
yeah.
You've heard about our Lendable Tech collection before, but I just wanted to talk through kind of some of the challenges of managing and budgeting for this collection. The Chromebooks are, let's see, so the Chromebooks are between $400 and $500 each. we have a really significant loss rate. We have identified funding to get another 50 Chromebooks. But there's been a few snafus in the purchasing, but they're coming. Which is great because the Chromebooks that we have are bundled, so they are in the picture of that kind of shoulder bag, and they come with a hotspot, and they come with headphones and a mouse. So it's a full tech bundle for someone who needs to do work on a Chromebook. They've got everything they need. We are down to 12 of those. We started with 36. And we've lost so many just due to them being checked out and never returned. Despite all our efforts in getting our collection back. Some of them have been badly damaged, and so we just can't check those out again. But yeah, it's really uncomfortable seeing 84 holes on those 12 tech bundles that we have, but we're working on bringing more in. The hotspots had 67 holes. We have 110. We started with 200 and have lost quite a bit just through them being lost or damaged. Many interesting things happen with those hotspots. The data plans are $120 per device per year, which is an incredibly good deal. We work with a company that works with nonprofits to provide a discount for those data plans. So it's unlimited data through T-Mobile, and so it ends up being $10 a month, which we tried to get other companies to match that, but nobody can come close to that deal. So that's what we budget for those, but it really adds up.
And are you, going, like, I'm just wondering about the Chromebook investment versus like, laptops or Chromebooks that are available at the branch, but then you have to like check out while you're at the branch, but you can't leave with them. I'm just curious if that's something that you don't have the laptops just for the library use.
We do.
You
Yeah,
do.
each branch has its own collection.
Okay.
So patrons would come in, like Scotts Valley has them, and just ask staff and they'll check out a laptop. But they're just a limited duration. It's 2 hours.
Oh, just for 2 hours. I was just wondering, it's just that, I know there's such a high demand, but it also seems like kind of a big money sink too.
It is.
Don't we have a system in place for not being the free Chromebook store? And how do we fail at getting back such a valuable product?
Well, it's a very good question. I know some library systems do different models. There's pros and cons. We of course, they can't check it out unless they have a library card. So we know the individual and they will be fine. If we can, get them to, but some models, require that you bring a credit card, before you check it out. That has some equity issues, as you can imagine, and kind of reduces the whole point of it in the first place, which is accessibility. So we're sort of looking at this, though it is high, is kind of the cost of doing this business, trying to increase this accessibility. I think it's something that we have to continue to think about in terms of what else can we do to get these items come back, so that it can be available for them, right? So that is something that we need to keep considering. And I don't know if we have any good answers right now, but we're gonna keep working on that.
Could there be a fuse on the packets so that, when you check them out, electronic fuse, sorry. So that they stop operating after 30 days?
Yeah. I know that some libraries do it too, and I don't know.
We can do that. Yeah, our lit team has the Chromebooks managed through Google Enterprise, so they can brick the ones that have been gone for a long time. And we also have the ability to turn the data off on those hotspots. So we track those once they've been in lost status for a certain amount of time. We've got a spreadsheet, and it takes a lot of staff time to manage all this. But we go in and the T-Mobile has a site where we can go in and then type in the serial number of the device and turn the data off. We still get charged for it, but it does result in patrons returning those devices once
Yeah.
they realize that they're not gonna work anymore. It doesn't work for all of them, but it does result in some of them coming back to us. And then we'll inspect them and make sure they're still in working condition and turn the data back on and then put them back out into circulation.
Great. Thank
I like to think of it too, you know, it just shows how strong the demand is and how great the need is for the devices and for connectivity, and how many people don't have that at home, or maybe don't have a home to even try to get Wi-Fi at home. So it's, for some people, I think it's worth them losing access to their library accounts in order to keep that device. But then they don't realize that we're gonna turn the data off on them after a certain point.
I guess to your point, like, so I don't know how systematic we are in breaking them. But it's something that we probably need to explore, to see what the return rate is. But we're turning the data off, and we're getting some of them back. It seems to make sense that if we're, even though it does cost staff time to go in there and compare the records and do that, it may be worth a trial.
But that also speaks to accessibility for others.
Yeah.
Because when we buy 100 of something and 50 of them go south, that's 50 people who will never see them.
Then I would assume that they would just wipe the computers clean or whatever and start over. Or even sell the computer.
Yeah, I'm thinking that some may sell.
It's,
Yeah.
And we're not the only library experiencing this. I participated in some online panels of how to start up a lendable tech collection and a hotspot lending program, and shared our experience and best practices. And then we heard from other public libraries around the country that they're experiencing significant loss rates and really struggling with this as well.
yeah, I'm still just wondering about, just for the budget of loaning out the Chromebooks, just making more available in the library and also more hotspots, because I'm assuming those are less expensive, but then people would have the hotspots that they could. I mean, you can't do everything on a phone, but I don't know, it's just maybe prioritizing it a little bit, 'cause it's, that's just a huge loss, and I can imagine the people who are renting those, you know, are not necessarily going to, they have other priorities than returning it necessarily, so.
Yeah.
And what about like the school system, like the public schools, don't they lend out Chromebooks? So it's not public school students that are borrowing these.
Not that we're seeing, perhaps the hotspots.
Right, I think the hotspots are really, really important.
But yeah, and all of this is what we're trying to figure out, of how do we best budget our limited funds, maximize access. Another thing that we're considering for next year's budget is, this past year, the California State Library has funded a lot of incredible resources for public libraries across California. They funded our access to LinkedIn Learning, Coursera, and BrainFuse. They funded both the Vet Now, which is for veterans, and Help Now, which is online tutoring, both for adults and K-12 students. And then they've also funded the Parks Pass program. And we have 200 something Parks Passes. And for a while, we actually had some available in the branches, but now we have our link tables. We're watching carefully, because all of these things are on the state budget shopping block for next year. So we have to decide, what we're gonna keep, what we're gonna be able to afford to keep. So all of these together represents about $83,000 if we were to limit ourselves for the next year.
And they really are some, I don't know if any of you have used any of those resources, but they're incredibly powerful.
Mhm.
All of them are. BrainFuse is something that we're still learning, that some of the school systems aren't even aware of it. And we were asked recently by a middle school principal if we could help support them with tutors, and she wasn't aware of BrainFuse. She was, over the moon when she learned about it, because it is tutoring on demand essentially, with a live tutor. So it's a really powerful, and as Sarah said, it's a it supports all learning, so through college and then also through career advancement as well. So it's a really incredible resource.
Couple of things that I wanted to mention. So we don't have something in our collection. We have suggestions for looking outside our collection. One project we're working really hard on right now is launching Link Plus, which is something that more than 70 libraries throughout California participate in. And it's kind of like interlibrary loan. They've got their own courier system. And so it's actually patron initiated requests. So they don't have to do the staff like they do for a traditional ILL. And then because it's all within California and there's a courier, materials tend to arrive, they're telling us between 2 to 4 days, depending on where it's coming from. So it's really fast and it really expands our access to library materials across the state. So that's going to be great. It's just a hurdle getting there, but it's coming this spring.
So Sarah, would that be something that you would look at beyond just the normal catalog?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and we're having conversations right now with the company that does our catalog about how we want it to show up. So if the patron does a search and they get 0 hits, we'll have some sort of wording on that page about didn't find what you were looking for, try your search in Link Plus, and then we'll likely link to it elsewhere on our website as well. So patrons can find it without having to do that 0 hit search. And then for years, we've offered traditional interlibrary loan. That is something that staff does on behalf of patrons, and it connects us with libraries across the country. And we're very busy with interlibrary loan requests on behalf of our patrons wanting to borrow other libraries' materials. And of course, we lend our materials out as well. So most of those, there's a small courier system if it's around the Monterey Bay area, but most of it is done through mail. And of course, we'd like to hear what our community wants to see in the collection. And so we've had the suggested purchase form for about 3 years now. And it's been almost too successful. Like between 200 and 300 suggestions for purchase each month. A small fraction of those are things we already have, but maybe just weren't searched for properly, but that's not very many. Most of them are our patrons wanting something that we don't have in our catalog. So then we either refer to interlibrary loan or we'll purchase it as long as it meets our budget availability and our collection development plan. That's all I have. And that went a lot longer than I.
We had a lot of questions. I do have one more question. Is there, I don't know what your total budget is, but is there an amount that would make it so that you wouldn't have to make so many difficult decisions? Do you know what I'm saying?
We would do really well with $2 million.
Well, yes.
We're never gonna be able to offer unrestricted Hoopla or Canopy. We're always gonna have to limit those, and we'll always have to have holds and overdrive. And it just, I don't know how much it would be to try to not have any wait lists for any materials.
But it would be, it's significant, it's huge. And what about like your print materials? Are you able to purchase all the print materials that you
We do pretty well. We do have to say no to quite a few of those purchase suggestions that come in because they're often not, we don't have them for a reason. They're not things that we know are gonna be in demand, that have those positive professional reviews that are showing that have won awards or showing up on best of and recommended lists. They're often the peripheral, and so those are a little harder because we do want to make sure that we're connecting patrons with what they want in the collection, but sometimes it just doesn't always quite meet our selection criteria. And it's hard to spend $40 on a book and we think only one person's gonna use it once. So those are the things that have to take into consideration.
But otherwise, like just how you allocated your budget. So you're able to get all the print materials that you feel like you need, but it's all like the overdrive and all of the other e-materials and the Chromebooks and things like that that are. Is it both? Well, that's what I'm
Apple's
asking.
list for the title.
I
limit
know.
is pretty lengthy, and that's not the only popular
Right,
title we have right now. So we
Okay.
have, it's both.
it's both.
It's just the increasing of the digital, demand that's causing a little pressure.
Yeah,
Are we pursuing any grant opportunities with
Yeah.
regard to expanding some of the collection?
Yeah, and then, well, in the past, the Friends have been incredibly helpful.
Yes.
We did initially get those tech bundles through a grant. The hotspots we get at that discounted price, I guess it's not necessarily a grant, but somewhere up the line, it's a grant funded
Yeah.
program. But yeah, there are a few things. Jessie just got a grant through the Friends. She worked with the Friends on it, the Boundless Minds grant, and so that's really helped with the Jail Reach collection. Which otherwise we wouldn't have had that budget in our regular materials budget to get all of those. So that's been incredibly helpful.
Great, thank you. Okay,
Thank you.
thank you very much. Last item on our agenda is scheduled meetings, and we're having one in a few weeks, it seems.
Yeah.
How uncharacteristic. At the Branson 40, the beautiful Branson 40 branch. And one of the reasons why, and Eric and I discussed this, we were gonna put this meeting off, but it would put it past budget time. And I think we really need to give some input before it goes to the governing board with regard to budget. You know, case in point, the last presentation.
And so to add to that, so we actually started our process with the budget in February. We try to give like an overview, a very broad brush overview of what we're looking at. And then we really try to put the reports together for the JPA to review for the first time in May. And then they come back because they will have questions and you'll have questions. And then we try to finalize it in June. So that's the schedule. And I should have mentioned too, it's the same thing for I think it was under Susan Nemitz, but I could be wrong, where she began that practice of bringing policies first to all of you, before it goes to JPA. So
Yeah.
we've also been following that as well.
We like that.
Yeah.
Thank you, Susan. Wherever you are. So, anyone have any last comments for the good of the order? If not, I'll see you in 3 weeks.
Thank you.